I'm Sam, this is the Red Baron. You just caught me in the middle of a serpentine belt replacement. If this is your first time dropping by the channel, be sure to give a like, subscribe, check out my other videos. If not, well, welcome back to the shop. You already know who I am, you know who the Red Baron is, and you know I've got a 1973 Ford Bronco, and you're probably asking the same question that pretty much everybody else has been asking. Where the is the Bronco? What's going on? What's happening? Is it going to get done? Where is it? Did you sell it? Are you working on it? What's going on? Well, I'm here to answer all these questions and more today, so please bear with me as I go through the process of all these questions. So, first up, where's the Bronco? So originally it was at a body shop, which was local to me, and after some talking with them and another local shop that's a little farther away, we came to the conclusion that the project was going to be way bigger than we had anticipated, and we're going to move it to this new shop, which is more equipped to deal with this kind of stuff. So it went from a pretty much paint the body and throw on some new stuff and drive away to pull the body off the frame, full body off frame resto, rebuild, whatever you want to call it. The Bronco is not here. It's in the shop. I didn't sell it. Don't worry. I still have it. I would never do that. Anyway, so the Bronco is not here. So when's it going to get done? What's happening to it? You might be wondering that. I've kind of leaked a little bit of information about the process of the restoration in the past, and I haven't wanted to say much because it's not all A, it's not all set in stone, and B, it's still a long time coming yet. So things may change in terms of deadlines, in terms of what we're gonna do, but now I feel I have the confidence and enough information to tell you fully what exactly is going on with the Bronco. So it's been kind of under the DL, I know, and it's been annoying, I'm sure, but this is what's going on. So the Bronco is in off-road shop. They do all sorts of fabrication, you know, they build off-road vehicles. They go on Willie's Adventure every year. They know a lot of the four-wheel and off-road guys who organize Ultimate Adventures. They took one look at my Bronco and were like, well, hell yeah, we'll take it in. This will be our project. They're really excited about it. They don't really get a lot of Broncos. And I presented them with a bunch of ideas that I had come up with over the past, I don't know, like a year and a half probably. So we're going ahead with this plan that I have, and I will give you probably the most simplified version of this plan that I can because it's kind of complicated. Essentially, what's happening is this. The Bronco is getting a diesel engine. It's a diesel swap. I don't know how many of you saw that coming, but I certainly didn't, because for up until 6 months ago, I was dead set on a 347 stroker. And as soon as I found this other engine, I was immediately keyed into like, yes, this will A, be cool, B, be different. This engine actually has gained a lot of traction in the off-road and swap community in the past, I don't know, probably 4 years or so. Many of you probably can guess what it is already, actually. And there's actually been more Bronco owners swapping this engine in. I thought I was maybe one among like 2 or 3, but there's actually like 4 or 5 other Bronco guys who are doing this swap, which is really cool to see. And it's awesome to see this engine being utilized in Broncos, because I feel like they don't get enough, like, you know, support, because like this engine's often used in like, you know, Land Cruisers, Land Rovers, Scouts, you know, anything. I haven't hardly seen any Broncos with this engine. And for those of you who haven't already guessed what this engine is, yes, it's the R2.8 Cummins, the R2.8 Cummins turbo diesel. It's a 4-cylinder turbo diesel making 161 horsepower and 310 foot-pounds of torque at 1800 RPM. That's right, 1800 RPM. That is nuts for a tiny, tiny, tiny 4-cylinder turbo diesel engine. It's intercooled. It's a brand new crate engine from Cummins. It is probably the coolest diesel engine that I've seen in recent years. Like, sure, you can do your 4BT swaps. Sure, you can do your TDI swaps and all that stuff, and that stuff's cool. Like, they're cool in their own right. You know, the mechanical 4BT is a classic swap. You can't go wrong with that. But this crate engine is probably the most promising diesel engine in today's world. It's a crate engine. It's meant for repowers. Cummins is building it for the enthusiast. You know, it's perfect. For those of you who don't follow like Motor Trend or Dirt Every Day or Ultimate Adventure or any of those guys, they have beta tested the engine numerous times when it was like first coming out. There was a lot of SEMA builds on the engine. I've been following it pretty closely over the years because I'm a big fan of Ultimate Adventure and things like that. And I got word of this engine through that, and then it became available to the public, and I actually never even thought about it for the Bronco necessarily. After I got thinking about, a 347 would be so cool. Like, don't get me wrong, I love V8 power. This thing's, I got a 302 in my truck. It's awesome. The thing is like this Bronco build is going to be unique. It's going to be different. It's going to be special. It's going to be my Bronco. And I just thought, what can we do to bring this to the next level? What can we do to like make it sort of my own, but also improve upon some things that I had concerns about, like fuel mileage, for example. Like the 347 would be awesome off-road and on-road, but at the same time, it's like you're probably getting pretty poor fuel mileage with that engine if you're pushing out like 350, 400 horsepower. Two, all that torque, that high-end torque is going to be way up in the RPM power band, way, way up. A lot of guys wheel with V8s, big V8s with fuel injection. That's awesome. Like, you can't go wrong. Coyote swap, with the new 7.3 Godzilla swap, hella bad's doing that swap. It's nuts. You should go check it out. But anyway, you can't go wrong with V8. But at the same time, man, the diesel is so cool. They're doing these swaps on Motor Trend. They're putting them in Jeeps. They're putting them in Land Cruisers. They're putting them in Scouts. They're putting them in literally anything almost. Like, they're putting them in cars. I saw a Volvo with a R2.8 swap. Like, you can street this engine easily. You can cruise down the highway at 70. Why do you think the guys at Motor Trend and the guys on Ultimate Adventure would use this engine 4 years in a row for their Ultimate Adventure rig? 4 years in a row they've used this engine. And I have talked to both Christian Hazel and Trent McGee about this engine, and they have nothing bad to say about it. They're saying the great things. Remember the Ultimate International Scout? That thing weighs 6,200 pounds. That is nuts. And that engine pushes that thing along just fine along the freeway. And if you haven't seen the Ultimate Adventure for 2019, go check it out right now on Motor Trend. And that thing has a lot of power. It's got plenty of power. Like 161 horsepower and 310 foot-pounds of torque don't really seem a whole lot. But it's definitely not underpowered for its weight. It only weighs about 500 pounds. So it's a pretty good power to weight ratio. And also, too, you can tune this engine. That is one giant thing that's been drawing people to this engine, is you can tune it. And there are guys who tuned that thing right out of the box, like instantly, before there were any sort of aftermarket support for these engines. They were just going at tuning them, EFI Live, they were doing all sorts of stuff. But anyway, so people tune these engines and they're making 200 horsepower and 400 foot-pounds of torque, which is crazy. Like, that's more than I would need necessarily. I mean, that would be almost perfect. If I could have somewhere around 200 horsepower and 400 foot-pounds of torque, maybe a little less. I wouldn't want to push it too much farther than that because that engine's pretty small. But man, that's just, the potential with that is nuts. And not only that, there's aftermarket companies who are making tons of parts for the engine to be swapped into, whatever you want. And they're making all these parts. And because Cummins, is not making a ton of replacement parts for this engine, there are aftermarket companies who are stepping up and, saying, here, we can provide these things for this engine, whatever. And the swap is only getting more popular. It's just getting more and more attraction among the off-road and, just car enthusiast community, basically. I've been watching the Repower forums on Cummins. I've been watching all sorts of there's a Facebook group for the swap. There's all this information about it, and it's really cool to see all these enthusiasts coming together to talk about this cool engine. Let's talk about some other details about my Bronco. So what am I going to run for a transmission? So that question was also actually answered by the guys from Ultimate Adventure, and I had done a lot of research about transmissions. I talked to a lot of people. And for a while I was thinking, I remember I had mentioned in my other video about an NP435, and I was like, I need to go with something a little more modern. I need to go something with I want something that has the best of both worlds. I want to be able to crawl, but I want to be able to get on the highway with an overdrive. What did I find? I found the Tremec TR4050, and this transmission is basically perfect. It solves both my problems. And not only that, it's a pretty new transmission in the last couple of years, and it shifts incredibly. And I don't know if remember you guys had checked out my Instagram at all. If you haven't, check it out below right now at Sam's Shop. Check it out. Anyway, but when I was at Bronco Super Celebration, where I got this hat and this shirt, Phil's Next Bronco, pretty awesome. When I was there, I got to drive a Sorry, I got to drive a Jeep basically. What? With this transmission in it, and man, it shifted like butter. It was just, I can't even explain it. It was just so perfect. The detent was just, it just clicked into place. It was so solid. And it just felt like the throws were so short. It felt like a car transmission. I've driven manuals my entire life, everything from a 5-speed to a 4-speed to a 3 on the tree. Let me tell you, this was probably the most like slick, awesome manual transmission I've ever driven. Wild Horses Broncos, they had a transmission set up, like a Tremec transmission TR4050 set up like on a stand. And you could, go through the gears and stuff. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I was kind of pointing out to my dad, hey, check this out. This is the transmission I want. And some guy from Silver Sport Transmissions, comes up and holds up a pair of keys and says, hey, do you want to drive it? And I was like, what an opportunity. I was like, sure, why not? We took his Jeep around, drove it around the lot, drove it around down the street, drove it down to the nearest gas station and back. And let me tell you, that thing was awesome. So this transmission, for those of you who don't know, you can look it up, but the first gear is 6.16 to 1. That is a low first gear. That's like granny first gear, like category almost. But it's synchronized. It's not one of those ones where you have to sit there and just wrestle with it like those old Ford truck transmissions. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. It is synchronized as well as all the other gears are. Overdrive, reverse, first, whatever. And it's got 5th gear overdrive. And this is the same transmission that the guys from Ultimate Adventure used behind the R2.8 in the Ultimate International. And they were like, that's a perfect combo. You're going to love this transmission. Go with this. This is awesome. It handled great off-road. It was perfect on the highway, blah, blah, blah. And I've heard guys put everything from the ZF5 to the AX15 behind the R2.8. Those are great transmissions too. The ZF5 is a heavy-duty truck transmission. The AX15 is like a medium-duty transmission. Before some aftermarket companies stepped in, you needed an adapter to adapt the ZF5 to the R2.8. But then Quick Draw brand, who many of you probably are familiar with, stepped up and started making adapter plates and kits for the Cummins and these transmissions, and the AX15 and the ZF5, NV4500 or whatever, all those transmissions. And they have a package which is the R2.8 and the Tremec TR4050. I'll post a picture up right now. They have a package where they sell the whole thing for you, and it saves you a ton of money instead of having to buy the individual crate engine and the transmission separately. So that's what I went with. We actually have on order that kit. So the Quick Draw brand, TR4050, and the R2.8 Cummins in one kit. It's already bolted all together. Saves us a ton of money and work and time and etc. So that's coming. That's on the list. Not only that, so we've got the transmission, the engine, what's next? The transfer case, right? So, transfer case. I was thinking Atlas for a really long time. And Atlases are awesome. Like, they're the go-to heavy-duty transfer case for any application off-road. Like, you can put them in anything. But the only thing is they're huge. They're weigh a lot. They're huge. They're expensive. And I was like, I know. And it was like going back and forth about the transfer case. And it was just like, I've got my Dana 20 and blah, blah, blah. And I talked to some people about that. And I talked to Trent McGee. I talked to some other guys on the Cummins forum. I talked to a bunch of other people. I did a lot of gear calculations on the gear calculations website. If you have never used that, I will link that down in the description because that saves you a lot of time sitting there writing down all your gear calculations. I don't know who would ever want to do that on paper, but it just instantly makes it so easier. You just put in your transmission, your transfer case gears, your axle gears, your tire size, road speed, and then it gives you a whole readout of everything you need to know for that. So check that out. It's super handy. Also, along that line, Cummins actually has a gear calculator on their website to calculate for RPM and road speed at a given RPM with a certain setup, transmission, axle gears, tires, and then road speed. And it'll calculate RPM, and it'll show actually the speedometer, or like an image of the speedometer of the R2.8, and it'll show where the power band and the efficiency band, or the efficiency band and the power band are on the speedometer. And it'll it'll place the needle within that band. And that's how I chose the setup I've got. So I used a combination of this Grim Jeeper gear calculator and Cummins calculator on their website to pick out my setup. So, and basically I came up with this. So the Dana 20 is a pretty robust transfer case. For those of you who aren't Bronco guys, the Dana 20s are pretty desirable. So my 73 Bronco's got the 234 gear set in the transfer case. So what does that mean? So the Dana 20 itself, so calculating out the gear calculations with my engine, my transmission, and then my transfer case with the 234 gear set, plus my axle gears, yielded a pretty desirable crawl ratio that wasn't too intense. So I had thought a long time about a underdrive or a doubler setup, actually, like an MP 203, 205 doubler, or a black box underdrive, which is made by Northwest Fab. And for a while I was like, this will be perfect. I'll have these nuts gearing. I can go, ghost ride the whip, whatever, walk around the vehicle as it's driving up a grade or whatever. But, the more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, that's a lot of money, and that, adds length to my drivetrain. And so I asked people, I was like, is this overkill? What do you guys think? Blah, blah, blah. And I got a lot of responses, I have a doubler, I never use it. Or like Trent was saying, we had the 205, 203 doubler in the UJ6D, that blue Jeep they had. That had the R2.8 Cummins. It was a stretch wheelbase Jeep, and it had a doubler setup in it. And they were doing some really hardcore stuff on that trip. They always do, but still, they were doing some hardcore stuff. And he's like, the doubler was like almost never needed. And I thought, with the stuff that I'm doing, I really haven't wheeled all that much. And I don't really think I need a crawl ratio of 160 to 1, which would be what that ratio is roughly about with my setup. And I was like, it'd be cool to have the really low gearing if I ever needed it. But at the same time, it's like I probably won't. With the instant torque of the diesel, the super low crawl gear, first gear of that transmission, and then the Dana 20 and the axle gearing, and I'm running lockers, I'll probably be fine for like 90% of what I'm doing, honestly. Like in Wisconsin here, there's like no rocks. But, I want to wheel out in Colorado. I want to wheel out in Moab. I want to wheel out in, wherever. I want to go to these places and do different types of wheeling so I can experience that. But until I need it, I probably won't get it until I need it. So the gearing I'm going with, or the transfer case I'm going with, I should say, is the Dana 20. So I'm going to stick with the Dana 20, but it is twin sticked, which is nice. I'm going to do a full rebuild on it. I'm going to replace the output shaft for a super heavy duty one. That's offered from Wild Horses and a couple other Bronco vendors out there too. So I'm going to replace the output shaft, do a full rebuild on the transfer case, and it's already got the twin stick, so that'll be perfect. I think just with the twin stick alone, I think that'll give me enough selectability in terms of gearing. And then I did mention lockers. So I'm going to be running lockers. The plan originally was to run air lockers front and rear, but in an effort to save money, I think what I'm going to do is run one air locker in the front there, and then I'm going to run like a Detroit or some kind of like lunchbox locker in the rear. For those of you who don't know what those are kind of like cheaper, almost DIY blockers, and they're like ratcheting lockers, so they engage when they need to. You don't even have to think about it. You don't have to flip a switch or anything. They engage when the tire needs traction or whatever. So that's sort of the plan right now, is the lunchbox locker in the rear, air locker in the front. And so moving on, we have axle gears, as I mentioned. So the axle gears, I did a lot of calculating with 456s. I even thought about 488s. And then I settled back to 410. And why did I settle back to 410? Well, I calculated out the gears for the road speed and stuff, and the 410s put me exactly on the dot right between the power and efficiency band on the Cummins. And that's the setup. That RPM is perfect for where I want to be in fifth gear at 70 miles an hour. If I'm driving on the highway, if I'm driving to a trail, if I'm going on whatever, I still want to be able to drive this rig on the highway. And it's going to perform on the trail, obviously, but it's going to be able to hit the highway too. And not only that, I already have 410s in the Bronco. And they actually came from the dealership as an option back in 1973. If you got the limited slip, often that would come with 410s for your axle gears. So 410s, that's the plan we're going to run for that. And I mentioned lockers, I mentioned the transmission. So that's the plan. That's basically the drivetrain plan for the Bronco. Doing a swap is always a huge endeavor. It's a huge project, especially if you don't have a lot of information about where to get stuff and stuff like that. So That's where a lot of these aftermarket companies come in. And not only that, I've been actually following a lot of these build threads on the Classic Bronco forum, on the Cummins forum, talking about people who were like doing this swap in Broncos and other vehicles too. But when I was at Super Celebration this past April, I saw Kincer Chassis there. And if you've been to Super Celebration, you probably have seen Kincer Chassis. They have these aftermarket Bronco chassis. They're completely built. They're full suspension systems, full frame. They make all these chassis. Crawler's Edge makes a bunch of stuff. Kincer Chassis makes a bunch of stuff. And I see they have the R2.8 on a Bronco chassis. Well, one of their chassis, but they have the R2.8 sitting there. And I remembered when I went to Super Celebration in October, and even back in 2018, when I first went to Super Celebration, they had the R2.8 there. So I started talking to the rep there at Kincer Chassis. He's saying, yeah, we've got components for this. We've got motor mounts. We've got this intercooler radiator set up. We've got the whole 9 yards. And it's like, we've got all these aftermarket parts. And I was like, I never saw this stuff on your website. He's like, well, we don't have it marketed on our website. It's kind of a new thing. We're like, they were testing it back in the few years prior, and now they're like, you know, making it available. And that's sort of the thing I've seen. It's like all these companies are kind of coming out of the woodwork, you know, supporting the R2.8. They're making products for it, like Axis Industries, Quick Draw brand. Those are like the big two. Yeah, so Kincer Chassis, they're going to supply the intercoolant radiator, I'm pretty sure. They have like a package, which is really interesting. It's like a all-in-one deal, which would be awesome because I don't really want to mess around with choosing the right radiator and choosing an intercooler and making it all fit and be perfect and, you know, stuff like that. And then also we've got, I'm pretty sure they make motor mounts and some other ancillary parts that I can't remember at the moment. They have like this coolant tank thing that's like mounted on the shock tower or something. It's really interesting. But anyway, so Kincer Chassis, Quick Draw brand, those guys are awesome. They make tons of components for the Cummins to bolt whatever you need to do it, especially if you're a Bronco guy. But anyway, so those are like two big companies for that. And of course, it wouldn't be a Bronco without James Duff Suspension, so we're going to go with the James Duff Suspension. I've always had this in my head forever. I didn't know exactly which one I wanted. I looked at a ton over the years because I've been to, the 3 years that I've been to Super Celebration, I've, talked to the guys at James Duff, seen James Duff himself. I got to tour their shop in Knoxville in 2018, which was awesome. That was so cool. And actually, I knew this guy who was working for James Duff at the time, and then he actually went off and started his own Bronco business, RPM Early Broncos. And it's sad to say that we lost a great member of the Bronco community recently, Mike Wood. I only met the guy maybe 2 or 3 times, and when I did meet him, I mean, it's like he was such a nice guy, and he was super knowledgeable, knew a lot about Broncos, and he just did great work. I followed him for a long time, 3 years or so. Very tragic, but I'm glad to have met him when I did and talked to him when I did, because he gave me a lot of great information about the James Duff stuff and also some other general information about Broncos. So anyway, so we're going with the James Duff suspension. So the plan is to run a 3.5-inch monster suspension kit with a 2-inch body lift, because the 2-inch body lift is A, required for that suspension kit. It's the monster kit. And B, it's also some amount of body lift is needed to make sure the engine sits right. It's a 3.5-inch monster suspension kit with a 4-link in the rear. So yes, I'm 4-linking the rear, the 4.9-inch. I'm super hyped about that. I'm really excited to see how it handles on the road. I've never driven a vehicle with a 4-link or 3-link or anything like that, with coils, so that'll be really interesting to see. So we're going with the 4-link. I'm really excited about that. I was a little concerned that I had to maybe stretch the wheelbase in terms of like how high it was sitting, but that is not an issue. I'm going to be running my 35s, my 35 by 12.5 by R15 tires. They're Goodyear Wranglers with the Kevlar sidewalls, super aggressive tire. I've put like 5 miles on them probably, or like less than 10 miles on them before it's been, sitting forever in the shop. So I'm really, really excited to actually get those out and test those out for real, because I don't know if you remember, but we did test out those tires just a little bit in the mud after I got them for the Bronco. And back then the Bronco had like a 2-inch, and we bashed the fender flares with a hammer to get them to clear, right? And there was pretty much no rubbing. I mean, at full stuff, obviously there would have been rubbing, but so anyway, so we're going with that suspension kit. I'm super excited about that. I'm probably going to be running a sway bar, at least in the rear, maybe the front. Both of them are available, front and rear, quick disconnect sway bars, which will improve, some on-road handling. No more body roll where you're sitting like, you're going 70 miles around the corner and the whole body just, especially with that coil suspension, it's real soft and stuff. And so that kind of brings us up to pretty much everything that I'm getting so far, other than the body. And the body's like the part of the whole project, basically. For those of you who sort of remember or knew about this before, the Bronco had a lot of like hidden rust and hidden issues with the body. When I first started sort of getting the Broncos project started, really started, I brought it to the body shop here in town, and we ordered a bunch of steel body panels from Dennis Carpenter. We started fitting body panels, and they were just not lining up. On the one side was lined up, the passenger side, but the driver's side was not lined up at all, and it was just like, what the... what's going on here? So we, started doing some measuring and started doing some stuff, and the frame was all fine, and we're like, that's weird. And so it turns out the whole body was like tipped to one side, just very little, like on the driver's side, and it was just like that. And we looked underneath, and it was like, yep, there's all this rust where the cab mounts are and the body. It's just we did not expect that at all. We were presented with the sort of decision whether do we patch this and move forward and then replace it in X amount of years and then have to keep doing more metal work to it, or do we go with a new body? It's like, man, that was a tough decision. But in the end, we decided new body, and that was like a year ago. So we decided a new body. We went forward with a new body, and then COVID happened and everything got delayed. Our Dennis Carpenter body tub was delayed 15 months. And it was just, there was no end in sight, and we were like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And right about the time COVID was sort of happening was when we transferred this project over to this other shop. And we told them all these things, all these issues. They took a look at the Bronco. They were like, yeah, the new body makes sense. We can do that. And so we started talking about what can we do to make this process happen faster. So we talked to Bronco companies. We looked online for a Bronco locally to put a new body on. Well, I say new, but like a used body on the Bronco. We thought about just running it with the old body. So we went to Super Celebration, and we talked to Fossilized Customs, Todd of Fossilized Customs, and his son-in-law owns Hellabad, and he's good friends with Gordon Bailey of Bailey Built, and he's a really knowledgeable guy, super nice guy. He had bodies available, so we went with him. We went with Todd for Fossilized Customs, and he's making us a body, and so we have that on order. Not only is the body scheduled to arrive either sometime in August, like this August, like it's going to be either August or September, this summer, fall, and the suspension is going to arrive about the same time frame, and so is the engine and transmission, providing there are no random delays of any kind. So everything's scheduled to arrive about the same time, all the big stuff, I should say, like the body, all that stuff, kind of the integral part of the swap. So the Bronco is moving forward. There's forward progress. Finally, like, holy cow, like, I'm sure you're excited, but man, I'm excited because I've been sitting here waiting for like two and a half years, basically, and the Bronco's just sat and nothing's been done, and it's like, oh man, it's just heartbreaking to see it sitting there, and it's like, I want to be driving it, but also it's like, man, I just need to have some forward progress, and it's been a long time coming, and I'm, very thankful for everybody who's been a part of this process, no matter if, they just said one, like, sentence to help us out, or if they're providing any sort of product for us, or any word of advice. I've asked countless questions on the Bronco forum, the Facebook groups, the Cummins groups, the all those forums and groups and stuff. I've sent countless messages to people. I want to say one big thank you to everybody who's helped me thus far. I can't express my gratitude enough. It's just incredible. My Bronco would not be where it is today, and it won't be where it is soon without your input. So thank you very much. And thank you everybody else, all you guys watching, and all the people I've talked to for bearing with me for this, because it's been such a long time, such a long project coming, and we've still got a long ways to go, but it is finally happening. It is finally starting. The plan is the parts will arrive, and we will start mocking up a lot of the parts with my old body. They're going to set it up and drop it down on the new stuff, kind of measure and do some checking. They're gonna prep the frame and do all that. When the new body arrives, we can start dropping everything on. They don't have to measure anything. They can just like, okay, yep, this will work, check everything. And one of the great things about the new body is that we're actually going with a modified firewall that's set back a little bit. It's like it's stock length on the side and it kind of recesses inward. We're gonna have plenty of room for the engine, but the recessed firewall just allows us to kind of like adjust where the engine's gonna sit on the frame, on the cross member, whatever. And also too, it gives us a lot of space for the intercooler, the AC condenser, the radiator, and like the fans and the whole thing. And so that's going to be perfect. We're going to be able to adjust that distance perfectly to provide optimal cooling, and the engine will sit perfectly, you know, whatever. And there'll be room for other random accessories in the engine bay, I'm sure. So anyway, so that pretty much wraps this video up. So this is the big plan for the Bronco. There's a lot of other minor stuff I could talk about, but that's probably not going to come for a little bit. So I'll save that for later. But one last thing I'd like to show you was something I found recently on a little camping trip. I went to an antique store, and look what I found. A twin air horn. Now this is pretty badass. You can't deny that it's pretty cool. Found this thing for a solid 25 bucks. Has a little crack in the bell here, if you can see. But man, this will be cool sitting on the hood or the roof of the Bronco. Man, I could just see this rolling down the highway. I don't know if you remember, but my Bronco's also going to be running a one of those old style spotlights, which would go like kind of like over here on the windshield, sort of A-pillar on the Bronco. And I think this horn plus that spotlight would really kind of bring together that classic 4x4 look, that retro vintage 4x4 look. And I've always wanted to run an air horn on my Bronco. Just think it's super cool. So we got this air horn, and I was like, I haven't tested it yet, but I'll put a little video, a little short up for testing this air horn. It is a Hadley 11670, which according to the internet, I think is like from the 50s or something. So it's pretty old. I have no idea what this would have come on, if it's like a pickup truck horn or a truck horn, or I have no idea. I mean, it's a twin horn, so it could have been anything. But I'll put a little video up of testing this to see if it works. Hopefully it does. I don't see why it wouldn't. It's just got a little crack in it. It doesn't seem to be missing any parts, and it's got the air inlet. So pretty rad. Anyway, so we're gonna throw this on the Bronco probably. And when I do that, and when I do some other stuff like that, I'll kind of talk about sort of the plan for the Bronco, like in sort of like the theme, the design, the look, the paint, the interior, the exterior, kind of what we're gonna go for in terms of that. Thanks everybody for watching this video. Sorry it was a little longer one, but I just wanted to have that update about the Bronco and show you this cool little thing I got. Stay tuned for the test video on this horn, and stay tuned for more updates on the Bronco and other content coming to my channel soon. So thanks everybody for watching, and thanks for coming by the shop.